Hello, my lovely one. Sorry, I'm 3 minutes late. Yeah, three. Sorry about that. But I was still preparing. I had to change. Oops, there's my water in the way. I still had to print out some stuff, and then the paper was empty. And so far, always my children changed over the paper for me, so I had to search where that is on my printer. But anyway, welcome to the first part of Countdown. Hi, Nina. And Scott, hi. Welcome to the first part of Countdown to Valentine. Lovey-dovey is just my thing. I absolutely love love. So you know me, I'm very romantic. I'm like extremely romantic. Yeah. Hi, Safa. Good to see you guys. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me live. Hi, Jennifer. So I'm going to do a few readings of my books, and I'm also going to do card readings, but the card reading is a bit later. So and then you can all pick a card and you get, you get a romance card from me live. So, but now, first of all, I'm going to put us into a really romantic mood, and romantic as in for adults. So the other day I was reading something, and people in America, hi Petra, coffee. So people in America who has still daytime had to remove their children from the room or something. So please do that now. Put your earbuds in. This is for adults only, okay? Put your earplugs in, or your remove the children from the room, or whatever you have to do. But this is not for children, okay? If I do a reading for children, I will let you know. That's okay. This one is for adults, okay? This is explicit. Hi, Donna. Right. I'll give you a couple of minutes to sort out your kids, if anybody has kids there. So, hi, Willow, Cat. It's so great of you to join. Nice to see you. Yeah, so first of all, what I'm going to read to you is poetry. I'm going to read poetry for you, and from my book Love Expressed, which is 66 poems of beautiful romantic. It kind of ranges from sweetly romantic to very graphic erotic, but it's always to do with love. It's not just, just physical stuff. And that would be pornography, wouldn't it? We don't like that, do we? Anyway, we're talking, this is creation from the heart space, isn't it? So that heart always has to be involved in all of this. Hi, Gordon. And the queue is getting longer, Susan. Welcome, everyone. So here we go. The first one is called, I put that all in a folder here. So I've got it all together, everything that I'm going to read to you. So the first one is called Possession, and that's number 56 from my book, Love Expressed. If you want to have a look, I've put my website link. The Linktree link is all about where you can stalk me in cyberspace. And then the books to read, it's got all my books, and you can choose whichever store you want, to buy the books from. So that's all for you there. I think that's the important stuff. Hi, Susan and Jim. Oh, Susan, we had you, sorry. But anyway, I'm doubly happy that you're here then, obviously. So here we go. Possession. Slowly, gently, your voice caresses my senses, encircling my core with its velvet sound. Slowly, gently, you persuade all my fences to open their doors and be your playground. As you set me free, tearing down brick by brick of my inner wall, enticing me between carrot and stick, heeding your masculine call to surrender my femininity at the altar of love's trinity. You, me, our connection, deeply etched into my heart. Your strong arms encircle my chest in a possessive embrace. I render up my life to your protection. True was your aim to fly your dart, hitting me square and fair at its best with your love's powerful grace. When your heart opens and envelops mine, holding it tenderly and safe, in the powerful space, so secure and protected from all harm, you worship at my shrine, so seriously, so gravely. Over is the hunting chase, and instead I submit to the embrace of your loving arm. Hi, Margareta and Jade. I hope you enjoyed this poem. And there's one more to come now. And that's also from my book Love Expressed, number 61 poem. There's 66 altogether, which is 6 is, if anybody knows anything about tarot cards, there's the major arcana and the minor one. And in the major arcana, there are 22 cards from 0 to 21. And number 6 is the Lovers. So I decided to have 66 poems in dedication to the tarot. You know me, being spiritual, I have to mix it up all the time. The romance and the spiritual. Hi, Jadine. Thank you for joining. So, she's mine. I've written that from the point of view of a man. Her eyes are as blue as heaven, her smile a sensuous curve, the sun flecking her hair with streaks of gold. I catch my breath, hardly working up the nerve to speak to her, but speak I must. So I approach her, this apparition at dusk. I can't believe she gifts me a glance that is so warm as the color of autumn leaves, as she stands in the soft glow of Christmas lights, faintly illuminating the features in the street. I pretend confidence and swagger and assurance I truly have not. But how else to lure this heavenly creature into trusting me? Her sensual curves are so hot, like the drink I invite her to, and she says yes. We talk about anything, travels. I'm such a mess. I have to concentrate so hard to keep myself from kissing her right then and there. But making her smile and laugh is a good start. Sweet angel, come to earth to illuminate my soul. Your admiration lends me wings and I suddenly feel whole. The restlessness of my spirit has transformed into peace. I've seen the bad and ugly, but now in your presence, my mind is at ease. Is it possible that after all this time of fighting the cause to protect and serve, I finally am afforded a reprieve, a pause from nightmares, hardship, and pain as I step into the light of your generous spirit? Decisions is made. This will not be in vain. Not this time, not ever. She is too precious to me. So in that moment when I lean in to kiss her cheeks, I know she is mine. I have found what my heart seeks. Hey, JD. Hi, Doreen and Sandra and Odette. Thank you for joining me. So I hope you enjoyed those poems. I hope that very much. And the next one I'm going to read to you is from my book, which is going to go live just after midnight. Yeah, at least in most of the stores, I think. Some might be, because where I uploaded, that kind of distributes. It's like a hub, and it distributes all over the place to all the online stores. So some might be a bit late as well, but just give it a try for your preferred store. Hi, Olivia, Sharon, good to see you. And just have a look. Otherwise, just save the link and try again, or get it from a different store. I don't know which one. Anyway, yeah, they're all a bit different, and I wasn't early enough to actually do a pre-order thing because I've only really finished working on it yesterday. And now I'm working on the print version, so that should be up next week sometime. You'll be able to get the book in print. And thank you so much, Odette. Thank you. Congrats. That's nice of you. So I am going to read chapter 1 and 2 for you. And well, there are lots more, so being generous here. I want you to really be in the mood of love. It doesn't have to be like a couple thingy love. It can be any kind of love. Just feeling that kind of love that is going through you all the way, from the tip of your toes until the top of your head, and just glowing inside with it and having this feeling, if it's for yourself as well. Love yourself like that, and your children and your friends and your family and your partners, whichever one. So, oh yeah, talking about partners in the plural, by the way, this is a reverse harem novel, which is the first of 3. It's a trilogy, which means 3 in a series. Holy Trinity. So the first one is called Tang, and his real name is George, but everybody calls him Tang because he's like really huge, If you think about in the dimensions of like somewhere between Jason Momoa and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, like really tall and really big and muscular and all that. So you get the idea. So he's like this huge guy, right? Then there is Seb, who looks like a Viking. But like Ragnar from Vikings, if you need to have a visual. And then there is Dom, who is a Spanish guy, and he's got those really good looks, this Mediterranean thing going on, with the thick black hair and all that, and he's very proper and businesslike and that. So so they're all 3 distinctly different, which you will get an inkling of as I'm reading to you. And yeah, I really enjoyed so much writing the first part, and this book is around about 60K words, so that makes it my second longest novel ever, which is why it took so much time. And there was a burnout in between as well. I actually wrote the raw version of it in 2018. Then I couldn't work on it anymore and rewrite and edit and all that because I lacked the brain power and capacity while I wasn't feeling so well. But now I'm back in the saddle. Things are going great. And as you can see, book number 2 is out 5 minutes after midnight. Oh, and there's going to be, German time, which is CET. And there's going to be also promotional videos going up everywhere, so yeah, all at that time, so you can watch that and click on the link and get your book, your coffee, and read the rest of it. And tomorrow I'm going to read some more, not the same stuff, in my book group, Tirza's bookstore. So, put that in your calendar as well. If you don't go out for, for a date or anything with your loved one, if you have time, then please join or catch the replay afterwards, okay? Anyway, I'm going to start now with The Seals in Spain, chapter 1 from the first book, Tang. Chapter 1, Mediterranean and Menages. The paper lay ready on the table where she'd placed it last night. Sarah had to find a new job and a new apartment. She looked out of the window. It was cold and rainy outside. The heating bills would be monstrous. Her apartment her apartment wasn't insulated, but it had been the only one she'd been able to afford at the time. And when she'd found a job, she'd been grateful someone had given her a chance. However, the constant worry about money had soon dampened her joy, and she knew it was time to move on. So on this Saturday morning, she was ready to look through the papers to move on. After ages of scouring the local ads, she sighed. Either she didn't have the necessary qualifications, or the jobs weren't any better paid than her current one. The other alternative was heavy labor, something she couldn't do with her chronic leg injury. Standing and walking for long hours on end were things of the past. She decided to try her luck online instead. Sarah switched on the computer and looked through vacancies, but there was nothing locally. She sighed again and did a wider search. Housekeeper wanted, a headline caught her eye. It was a live-in job in Spain, near Marbella. Light housework, keeping an elderly lady company. Carers and cleaners already present. Job description, managing staff and household expenses. Payment of bills, 2 days cooking when cook is off. Sarah frowned. That sounded lovely, almost too good to be true. She read on. Villa with ocean view, private beach. Wow, it sounded idyllic. But if she discarded it out of hand because she mistrusted it, she'd never know for sure, one way or the other. Brushing the negative thoughts away and reminding herself that she created her own reality with her negative thinking and lack mentality, which she was sorely fed up with herself, always living from hand to mouth, she decided it was time for a change in her way of thinking. She had to believe that this not only could be true and just as perfect as it sounded, but that it actually was. And, moreover, that it was hers. She quickly wrote a letter and sent her CV, asking about the physical and mental health of the old lady and whether she, Sarah, would be expected to speak Spanish because she didn't, but was willing to learn and visit an evening class to be able to better communicate with the locals, to perform her duties ever more efficiently and autonomously. It didn't take more than 15 minutes before she received a reply from a Domingo Santos, the man who had put in the job vacancy, saying that she was expected to speak Spanish. But the fact that she had raised 3 children to maturity, as she had informed him in her CV, let him hope that she had the patience to deal with a frustrated soul whose mind was still sharp, but whose body was failing her. The result was that the old lady was quick to anger and had been known to fling teacups at her predecessor, who had consequently resigned and left. Domingo ran a company and didn't have the time to spend several hours a day with the old lady. He never said she was his mother, so Sarah wondered whether she was a relative, and if not, why Domingo was looking after her. When she inquired about the old lady's interests, he replied she loved literature, loved being read to, but hated audiobooks. And the fact that he described her temper tantrum so honestly gave her a clue about how bad the whole situation had to be, and that many had turned down the job or resigned quickly because of it. So rather than throwing a new applicant into the deep end with false promises, Domingo had obviously opted for being truthful in the hope that only those applied who were genuinely capable of handling such a difficult personality as this old lady in question obviously was in possession of. Frustration oozed from his words, but also hope. Sarah replied that she loved to read. She had worked as a voiceover artist for a while, but then moved out of the city, and where she lived now, there were no recording studios, she explained. She further suggested for Domingo to call her, as sending emails back and forth was somewhat tedious and inefficient. When he did, she answered on the first ring. Senor Santos, she answered the call with a smile. Please call me Dom, he replied at once. I'm Sarah, she offered in return. You do have a nice voice, if I may say so. Thank you. I was told that lots of times, so I guess it must be true. And you like reading? Dom asked again to confirm. Very much so, yes. In fact, when my children were younger, I used to host a reading circle for children once a week. Oh, lovely. So literature is not alien to you. I can practically reiterate Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice by heart, she smirked. So you like light romance? I love the language of the author. She writes, or better wrote, beautifully. But I do like romance too. I also historical novels, although I'm happy to read anything the lady wishes. She's not your mother? Sarah was dying with curiosity about the relationship Dom had with the old lady. No, you see, she is. Well, I don't live alone. I have a close friend who lives here too. She's his mother, he explained, and Sarah wondered why there was a stutter in his voice that had sounded so confident before, and concluded that Dom and his close friend were most likely a gay couple, and he didn't know what her views on the matter of sexual orientation were. It's very nice of you to care for your partner's mum so much, Dom, she offered, wanting to reassure him that she didn't have a problem working for and living with a gay couple. We're not a gay couple. We're more like a house share, and actually we're not two but three. But we're not messy or loud, and we don't throw wild parties or anything. We're rather quiet, really, and don't go out that much at all. Only to eat at restaurants, but we don't party. He was eager to reassure her. She heard it in his voice. Oh, good, she answered cheerfully. I mean, about not throwing wild parties. I don't mind whether you are gay or straight or whatever. With 3 men around, if she ever needed anything heavy lifted, she could always ask one of them. That was all she was concerned about when caring for a frail old lady. So I take it the lady's son is British, she asked. Yes, no, Dom began, confusing her further. I mean, his mother is, but he grew up in the States. His father was in the US Marines, and Sebastian was in the Navy after college. Interesting. And you went to college in the States, she asked. Yes, I went to study there for a year. It was an exchange program, he explained. As he spoke English fluently with only a slight and very sexy Spanish accent, Sarah assumed that he wasn't American or British himself. How wonderful. And who is the third gentleman? Sarah asked. That's Tank. His real name is George, but no one ever uses it. And he was with Seb in the Navy and looks rather fearsome due to some scars in his face. But he's a true gentleman, polite, well-mannered, and doesn't talk much at all. He likes to build things. He's got a workshop on the grounds where he is most of the time, so you probably only see him at meal times, and even then you have to call him to remind him. What kind of things does he build? Machines or surfboards? That's his job, she laughed. He builds robots for a living. There are mechanical as well as IT components to it. Don't ask me, it's way over my head, and he doesn't talk so much about the details of his work. He's a member of Mensa, so he's officially a certified genius, Dom explained. That was impressive, Sarah thought. A genius who wasn't arrogant but polite and quiet? She had always imagined a genius to be arrogant and feeling superior to ordinary humanity, also high-handed and inconsiderate. But Tank sounded like a quiet, humble person who loved his work so much that he became so immersed in it to the point he forgot everything else around him, including mealtimes. What does Seb do? She asked next. He's no longer in the Navy, I take it, or he wouldn't be living in Spain with you. He's left a long time ago. He works for the Spanish government training task force teams as a freelance training instructor, Dom told her. Police and military, so he has to travel on occasion, but he's got his own training center, so mostly people come to him. That's nice, Sarah mused. That way he isn't away from his mother too often. They don't really talk. I should perhaps tell you, his mother thinks we're gay, and rather than being a couple, he cleared his throat with embarrassment, which made Sarah feel less intimidated. She thinks you are living in a gay ménage à trois? She asked gently. Yes. And she's homophobic? Sarah prodded. She tells everyone who comes into her room she has to live in a pervert's den. Dom sighed heavily. There is no point in hiding this from you. You'll find out soon enough yourself if you decide to meet her, so you better know up front what you're getting yourself into. Her earlier assumptions had been confirmed by that statement. Pearl wasn't an easy woman to handle, and there was no point in wasting everyone's time by making her out to be a nice old lady when the truth of the matter was very different. Sarah appreciated honesty over everything else. Beautiful words, however much she liked to read good literature, were one thing, but if they veiled the truth, there would be a rude awakening and trust would be destroyed. Something she had experienced in the past more than once. Oh, that's very narrow-minded. I mean, even if it was your chosen lifestyle, there's nothing wrong with that. It's as natural to be gay as it is to be straight or any other kind of sexuality between consenting adults. That doesn't damage anyone, Sarah said, to make her view on the matter clear so Dom didn't have to feel anxious and embarrassed about her reaction any longer. Well, thank you. Yes, of course it is. Only Pearl doesn't see it that way, and she doesn't believe we're not gay because we don't date much. Well, if we do, we don't bring the ladies home, he said. That's a good rule, Sarah agreed, as long as you're not serious about someone. She was happy to hear that she would not have to contend with an endless string of strange females at the breakfast table were she to take the job. Yeah, well, Tank doesn't talk much, and his facial scar and size puts a lot of the ladies off, to be honest. I'm always busy, and Seb's got a sick, crazy mother and a strenuous job. He interviews her carers every day when he gets home from work about how she is and so on, but he refuses to go in and speak to her, and she's just as stubborn. So there was a lot of dysfunctional family dynamic there, Sarah thought. In the past, she had also worked with families and children who came from a dysfunctional home and taught both parents and children how to relate better to and communicate with each other. She was sure she could help that here too. I'll see what I can do about it, she said. If she was good at one thing, it was getting people together. Then she realized she didn't have the job yet. You sound like you're willing to leave your entire life behind, Dom asked carefully, but she detected a faint glow of hope in his voice that made her smile instinctively. You have no idea how high my heating bills are, and I definitely need a new job anyway, she answered ruefully. Would you like to fly out here for an interview? We pay your travel expenses, of course, Dom reassured her. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat and then start pounding quickly with excitement. There was an element of fear of the unknown in it as well. It had not been easy to move out of London to a more rural environment in more ways than one, and that had still been in the same country. However, she was determined not to allow her fear to stop her from changing her life for the better. The least she could do for herself was to give herself the chance to fly out and meet the people concerned to see what life was like in Spain, and that, admittedly, somewhat unusual household. Yes, I'd love to. Just one more question about your ad. You wrote the pay is above competitive rates. How much exactly are we talking? She asked. Why don't we talk about it when you've met Per? Dom suggested quietly. I promise you, if you say no, it won't be for financial matters. She's that bad, is she? Sarah asked, making Dom sigh. There's no point lying about it. She is. Tank is Samoan and has some facial tattoos as well. And because the Arabs were here for centuries, I guess I've come out a bit dark. So she's racist too, Sarah asked. Yes, she'll love your blonde hair and blue eyes, Dom said dryly. And you wouldn't consider putting her in a care home? Seb wouldn't do that. But you would? We all agreed we'll put up with it. She's family, we're as close as brothers, so that's extremely noble of you, Sarah said. She felt a deep respect for those men's characters. Being discriminated against racially and sexually in their own home by a person who was solely dependent on them to boot took a lot of love, if not for her, then for their friend. The bond of brotherhood between those three men had to run very deep, which endeared them to her even more. That level of commitment and compassion, this kind of unconditional love for one another, was rare when really put to the test, and it was also an ideal she shared herself. Dom sighed. She's in a room, so it's bearable, but you still think you want to see our crazy household? I'm quite intrigued, actually, and I think the three of you must be very nice people to honor the Nazi mom so much. Nazi mom? Dom repeated. Well, she sounds like one. Dom chuckled. I like you too. When can you come down? I can hop on a plane tonight and return tomorrow night if you like, or I'll call in sick and stay another day, depending on how long you want me there. Pack your bags, I'll book you an evening flight, Dom said. He was obviously a man of action, not prone to waiting around and putting things off. Or they were all just that desperate to find someone for Nazi Mom. Either way, Sarah didn't mind. Having a day's break in a luxury villa by the ocean in Spain wasn't exactly a sacrifice, was it? Give me 1 second before I start on the next chapter. My battery's going to go. Thanks for sharing. You're very welcome, Odette. Hi, Paul, Kat, and oh my God, so many joined. Joanna, Kelly, Cassie, Gloria, Amy. Thank you so much all for joining me. So, chapter 2 is about to start. Okay. You ready? Chapter 2, Trouble in Paradise. Dom had booked her a seat with extra leg room. The small gesture of concern for her comfort was further proof of the man's desperation, she thought. He'd pick her up personally, he'd said, and had told her he'd take her to a restaurant for dinner on the way home. The flight went by uneventfully. Sarah spent the time reading and touching up her makeup one last time before touchdown. As she had only a small case of hand luggage with her, she didn't lose time at the luggage retrieval before she could walk out of arrivals. She wondered what Dom looked like and whether he would be able to recognize her from her photo. She had no idea what he looked like. Maybe he would be holding up a sign. It was always so embarrassing when you had to ask strangers whether they were someone you were supposed to meet for the first time. But then she heard a voice she instantly recognized calling her name. When Sarah caught sight of Dom for the first time as she turned her head in the direction of where his voice had come from, her breath caught in her chest. Could this man smiling and waving at her really be her new boss? Dom was beyond beautiful, masculinity personified. He was taller than most other men in the crowd, and considering that Spanish people were usually mostly shorter, that was a pleasant surprise in itself, as she had been worried whether she could see him in a throng, as she wasn't a tall person herself, but rather short, only feet 4 inches. Dom was well built and filled out his elegant yet casual and obviously expensive light summer clothes to perfection. He might be sitting at a desk all day, but he didn't look it. There wasn't an ounce of fat on him as far as she could tell, but instead enough muscles to draw immediate attention not only from other women but also men. His features, however, were stunning. His hair was wavy and black, cropped short on the sides and longer on top, sleeked back with some gel, thick and springy. It would be a pleasure to run her hands through, she was sure. His jawline was strong, his lips full and bow-shaped, determined. His charcoal eyes held an intensity and authority as he moved towards her that made people move out of his way instinctively, and his cheekbones were high and clear-cut. He sported a fashionable 5 o'clock shadow, too, that lent his face some added masculine aura and a certain hint of ruggedness that made him all the more attractive in her eyes. "Sarah, it's so good to meet you. I hope you had a pleasant flight." He shook her hand warmly and turned on his most radiant smile. It worked. Sarah felt like floating on air as they exchanged pleasantries, while he led the way to the car, taking care of her luggage without a word. It seemed to come instinctively to him to be a gentleman. She could detect no conscious effort on his part to remember to treat her with the utmost civility, but rather it seemed that this came to him naturally and was part of his personality. At the car, he first opened the passenger door for her before stowing the luggage and then going to pay the ticket. Sarah had always had a thing for men holding doors open and pulling out chairs and the like. Dom was the type of man, it seemed, who did all this effortlessly. Coupled with his sex-on-the-stick good looks, his impression on her was lethal. When he returned and got into the car beside her in the driver's seat, he smiled at her warmly, and Sarah had to fight the urge to drool very hard. He was drop-dead gorgeous, charming and polite without being stiff, she thought. How she would be able to work around him without staring all the time was beyond her, and she had to find a way somehow. They drove to the restaurant and sat outside on the high terrace overlooking the ocean. The view was breathtaking, and Sarah allowed Dom, against all better judgment, to order her a glass of crisp, dry white wine. She shouldn't be drinking alcohol during a job interview, but Dom seemed so sincere in his wish to make her relax, feel at ease, and have the best possible experience here that she relented. And to be honest, she didn't put up much of a fight. She couldn't stop smiling. "You know, looking at you and from the way you talk, I'd guess you'd be at least 10 years younger than what it says in your application," he told her. I mean this as a compliment, of course. If I hadn't read your CV and knew you have grown-up children, I'd never have believed your real age." Sarah was 43. She had had a stormy marriage, to put it mildly. They'd both been very young, and after the birth of their third child, her husband Dale had moved out and filed for divorce. However, although he didn't see the children anymore since he'd left the family, he had paid child support regularly, and as he was a wealthy man, Sarah had been able to stay at home and look after her children full-time. It was something she was very grateful for. Only then her ex-husband had died of a heart attack, and it had been hard to get her 2 younger children, 2 girls, through school and college. Her son had already moved out by that time, got his degree in the first year of his father's death, and was working. Once the children had all moved out, living their own lives, Sarah had moved to the countryside, tired of chaos, stress, and humdrum that was London. She had wanted the peace of nature at her front door and people who lived at a different pace, more relaxed, and who still cared about having a life outside of work and using social gatherings solely for networking. It all seemed so fake to her. She was half French on her mother's side. Her father was Dutch, and she had grown up in the Netherlands. At the tender age of 16, she had come to London for a holiday with her former best friend. Her friend had met a boy and he had invited them to a party. There she had met Dale. He had been older than her, working already. He had had a good job for a 26-year-old and had been very worldly. When she had returned home, she had found out she was pregnant. Afraid her parents would freak out when they heard, Sarah had called Dale in London from a payphone in the street and told him under tears that he was going to be a father. Dale had driven over to visit her and her parents and had promised to marry Sarah as soon as she was 18. He had kept his word, and they had lived in London together. When Sarah had lived there for 3 months, her second child had been on the way, and number 3 had followed 2 years later. Sarah had no formal education to speak of, but she had always loved to read and learn by herself. She had had a vast library when they had still had a large house, but had given away or sold most of her books, furniture, and other things when money had been tight and she had had to move into a small apartment with the girls. I wonder what Pearl will say when she finds out that my children are half black, Sarah suddenly mused and grinned wickedly. She found it easy to talk to Dom, and the wine had brought her naughty side to the fore. Dom looked at her in surprise for a moment. He obviously hadn't expected that, especially in view of the fact that she was willing to meet a racist old lady and possibly work as her carer. But then he threw his head back and laughed. Maybe we'll wait a little before we spring that on her, he chuckled. May I ask how old you are? Sarah asked him, feeling emboldened by their easy banter. I'm 37. Seb is 36. We're half a year apart, and Tank is 35. Sounds good, because if I need anyone to do some heavy lifting, ask Tank. He's always in the workshop on the grounds, and he is huge, so don't be frightened. He works out a lot as well, Dom said. But if you don't need the car lifted, I think any one of us will be happy to assist. You work out as well, is clearly visible, and I suppose in Seb's line of work, fitness is a must too. Dom nodded. Sarah tried not to look too mortified. Her own body was soft now. The toned curves of her youth were long gone. 3 children, office jobs, and a love for good food could do that to a woman. I think you're very beautiful, Dom said quietly, but it sounded sincere. I don't mean... He broke off and grimaced, realizing she might misinterpret his compliment as him trying to come on to her. No, it's okay, really, thank you, she hastened to put him at ease. It's just that women always think they have to be as skinny as adolescent boys. I personally don't like skinny women too much. I mean, talking about body shape, I'm not dismissing anyone's good character on the grounds of appearance, of course. Sarah chuckled. Dom wasn't as relaxed as he pretended to be. He seemed nervous, and now he was downright distressed at the way his thought had come out in words. He was seriously worried about not only creating a good impression, but to ensure she didn't feel threatened or intimidated in any way. I don't like skinny men either. Appearance, I mean, she grinned, enjoying the heady sense of power his obvious insecurity afforded her. Yes, not huge, but well, about your size. You have a very feminine figure, Dom said, emboldened by her taking the conversation so lightly. Anyway, what I wanted to say, please don't feel intimidated when you see us at the pool or at the beach. The implication was that she would see them near naked with chiseled bodies. Sarah laughed. That had been a very roundabout way of telling her not to be self-conscious around 3 men who looked like fitness models. You know, I'm half French and half Dutch. In the Netherlands, people are very much into sports and fitness. Well, at least when I grew up, it was that way. I was never skinny, but absolutely fine with hindsight. After I had had my children, that changed. But in my youth, I was always made to feel like I was fat and not good enough. I guess I still have a bit of a hang-up from that time. In England, people are a lot more tolerant. They take you as you are. That's one of the many things I love about the UK, she told him. Anyway, it's got nothing to do with you, but you won't see me wearing a skimpy bikini. I hope you learn to feel comfortable around us. We're not formal, so when you work for us, you'll be eating with us and you can use the pool and all that. It's no problem at all. When you're not working, you can jump in the pool with or without us. That's really not a problem, Dom said. That sounds nice, thank you. Do any of the other staff live in? She asked. No, you'll be the only one. I hope that's not a problem, Dom asked with concern. You have my word that you are perfectly safe with us. Hey, you let Nazi Mum live under your roof. I didn't exactly peg you down as a chauvinistic serial killing monster, Sarah said and smiled widely. She wasn't concerned about the men being gentlemanly with her or not. If at all, they probably didn't have any interest in her in any other way than that she was the housekeeper and Pearl's companion. But she wasn't so sure whether Dom was going to be safe from her. Still, she couldn't say this to him, and she'd be mortified if he told her he wasn't interested in her that way, and he had meant to compliment her about her youthfulness and figure, not with the intent of hitting on her. I'm not scared of you, she said as an afterthought. Your reasoning certainly has some logic to it, he observed. Sarah leaned back in her chair and sighed. They had finished their meal and were watching the sunset over a glass of wine. This was heaven. This wine is lovely, she said, and Dom offered her another glass straight away, but she declined. I don't drink often, so I get tipsy rather quickly. I can already feel this one glass, she explained, and I can't get drunk in front of my future boss at the initial job interview, no less, can I? Even though she said it in a teasing, light-hearted manner, there was some truth to it. And she had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to turn this job down, no matter how bad Nazi Mum Pearl was. It was all worth it, even only to see Dom every day and speak with him, she thought. She really didn't think he could ever be interested in her as a woman, but his presence and easy charm were going to delight her nonetheless. When the waiter came past, Dom looked at her questioningly and she nodded. They understood each other without words. Both were ready to leave and go home. When Dom had paid, they both drove the last stretch back home. Home. Would this be her new home soon? Sarah was tired. It was already late, and it had been a long day for her. Excitement could be draining too, no matter how happy the occasion. Tomorrow she would have to get up early to make the most of the day, as she was already leaving again in the evening. Besides, she had to make a good impression, and sleeping until noon wasn't exactly in line with that. Dom had already told her breakfast was at 8. He seemed decided already. If she was willing to take on the challenge of being Pearl's companion, he'd be more than delighted to offer her the job. The only thing he was worried about was that she'd refuse to work for them once she'd met Pearl. Reaching the car in the car park of the restaurant, they got into Dom's car, a white Mercedes. Sarah wasn't knowledgeable about cars, but even for a Mercedes, the car was luxurious and looked as if it had lots of extras fitted. She loved how comfortable it was and felt as if she was living in a TV series about rich people who had any luxuries they cared for at their disposal, anytime they chose, without a doubt, a second thought, or having to worry about what they would have to sacrifice in another area in order to be able to afford this. Sinking back into her seat, she sighed happily. Dom had held the door open for her again and handed her in. When he took the seat beside her and started the car, Sarah asked him, "Do you think Seb and Tank will like me?" "Honestly, I can't imagine anyone not liking you," Dom said while he turned to her and gave her a radiant smile. "If Pearl is still capable of liking anyone, it will be you. However, she may have lost this capacity already for good." I'm looking forward to meeting her, Sarah said. I'm quite intrigued, actually. Dom grimaced. Let's hope for a miracle, then, he muttered. The car pulled out into the road, and Sarah took the opportunity to study Dom from the side. He looked like a god, deeply tanned skin, thick wavy black hair, and a mouth that looked very strong yet infinitely kissable. I have one more question, she broke the silence. If I stay and one day Pearl dies, as old ladies are wont to do generally, what is going to become of me? We're still in need of a housekeeper, he said softly. Somehow he made the word housekeeper sound more like a caress than a job description. His slight Spanish accent was so sexy, she wanted to purr each time he spoke. It felt like a butterfly's wing stroking ever so lightly over her nerve ends, making them tingle in the most delicious way. When they reached the villa, Sarah thought it was more of a palazzo. No, that was Italian for palace, not Spanish, but the meaning was the same. Not in the dimensions of Buckingham Palace, of course, or similarly grand and vast buildings, which almost all came close to an entire town in their own right, but it was beyond the size of a stately home or a country manor, which was lavishly dotted around in the UK. This building was Mediterranean, Oriental, classicist, altogether, and it worked. It was a piece of art of infinite beauty, and it suited its owner, or at least one of the owners. She wasn't quite sure in whose name the deed was, but if Dom were to don the period costume of a Spanish king from the same period as his house had been built in, she was sure he'd fit in perfectly. There was something majestic and authoritative about him that told you that once he was a formidable man who knew how to wield power, and all gentlemanly manners, sweet words, and kind, caring gestures aside, wasn't a man to be trifled with. Wow, this is beautiful, she said, staring out at the building and taking in as much detail as she could in the darkness. It must be old, too. Dom looked pleased. Actually, it used to be a noble family's country seat, aristocracy, but the money dwindled and they had to sell their assets. After two other owners, I bought it and had it modernized, but I kept all the old stucco and other features intact, of course. It's always been my dream to live here one day, and when I could afford it, I made an offer the previous owners couldn't refuse. My parents used to work here, My father was the butler and my mother a maid. I was conceived here too, he chuckled. I practically grew up here. The daughter was my first serious girlfriend. Oh la la, I hope that didn't cause bad blood, Sarah grinned. In a way, she left me, and both our parents were upset with her, not with me. Sarah laughed. I hope you weren't heartbroken, she asked. Only for a while, until I met an older Dutch girl who was here on holiday. That was an eye-opening experience. Yes, some of us can be naughty, Sarah teased. Had his nostrils just flared? Well, if they had, she was certain it must have been the memory. He couldn't possibly get excited at the thought of getting naughty with her, could he? No way. And now, no woman on the horizon, she asked, feeling bold nonetheless. Dom only shrugged and got out of the car. He rounded it, getting her small suitcase out of the back, then opened her door and offered his hand. Each time he did that, it felt as if electric shock waves hit her body full force and zapped through every nerve end and cell. It was exhilarating and frightening at the same time, invoking strong emotions in both areas that fought each other for dominance. Thus far, neither had gained the upper hand, and Sarah wasn't sure if she wanted to miss the feeling of excitement and focus on the prudent side, or whether she should indulge in the heady feeling of conversing with a kind of man ordinary people like her only saw on celebrity news or read about in magazines but never had a chance to meet in real life. They walked up the front steps when the door opened, cutting her musings short. She nearly stumbled and froze on the last step. "Hi, I'm Seb. You must be Sarah." Before her stood a modern Viking in contemporary clothes. He had the sides of his head shaven while the top was grown long. His hair was plaited close to his head, ending in an intricately woven ponytail at the back. There were tattoos visible on his neck, forearms, and chest, where the skin peered out from under the unbuttoned top of his shirt. "You look like Ragnar, only better," Sarah burst out before she could censor her tongue. She quickly clasped her hand over her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I mean, Ragnar was the lead character from the internationally successful TV series Vikings. As Sarah had a weakness for strong warriors, she was watching every season that came out new, and while waiting for the next to be filmed, she even watched the previous ones again in the interim." Seb wasn't offended. He laughed. "You were right, bro. I like her. No harm done, Miss Sarah. I'm a big boy, and there are worse things in life than being complimented by a beautiful woman who is ready to battle a dragon." "Battle? Dragon?" Sarah asked. Did his good looks do funny things to her brain? Was he really a time-traveling Viking? Her imagination somersaulted with endless possibilities. "He means Nazi mum," Dom clarified with a smirk. Sarah blushed. They were talking about Seb's mother after all. She should pull her mind out of the gutter post haste. These men were her bosses after all, and not some guys trying to chat her up in a bar. Would he be upset now? But Seb threw his head back and laughed, a deep, sonorous laugh that vibrated through his entire body. "Nazi mum, that's brilliant. Now why didn't I think of that? You're cool, Sarah. Come on in and meet Tank. I'm dying to know what you make of him." At least Ragnar the Viking had a sense of humor. And he wasn't all that stuffy, but quite the opposite, possessing a raucous humor and self-assurance she loved. And with ink and a hairstyle as his, it was difficult to imagine him in a tuxedo sipping champagne and bourbon at a charity ball of the rich and famous. That was something she could imagine Dom doing. Remembering what Dom had told her about Seb's occupation, she thought that his choice of profession was likely a good fit, although he had probably had to learn to curb his impulsiveness and think more strategically, she thought. In the huge entrance hall, Sarah felt dwarfed. The men were a lot taller than her already, but the house looked bigger once you had entered it than it did from the outside. She looked up to the ceiling, which was 2 stories high. There were paintings, gold stucco, and a chandelier that could easily kill all of them if it dropped on their heads. "It's secured with a steel rope," Dom said gently. Could the man read her mind? Feeling safer, she admired the beauty of the exquisitely worked craftsmanship. "It's very beautiful. I've always wanted to live in a historical building, a manor house or something, and now I'm in a palace. I love how you've decorated it too. The glass tables blend in perfectly with the historical style and don't distract from the splendor," Sarah told Dom and made him smile proudly. "Thank you. I'll just take your bags upstairs and then join you in the lounge," he said. Seb took over and with a gesture of his large hand invited her to follow him. "Please try not to look shocked, okay? Dom told you about the scar and tattoos, didn't he?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded and tried to smile on what she hoped was a reassuring manner, then followed the Viking into the lounge. The man's concern for his friend's feelings touched her. He hadn't come across as overly sensitive to begin with, and that was a facet of his character she liked and appreciated. Tang, Sarah is here, Seb announced. Tang got laid on a couch. Now he sat up, which made him nearly as tall as Sarah, who was standing up. When he got to his feet, he towered over her, and Sarah was pretty certain she was on eye level with his solar plexus. She looked up, her eyes roaming over a powerful chest and up to his face. He had long, dark brown hair that he tied into a man bun on top, with the hair underneath falling freely down his shoulders. There was some ink in his face, but only on the ridge of his nose. She had seen photos of Samoan men with tribal tattoos covering their entire face and was surprised that Tang's ink was relatively sparsely distributed. It spread outwards to just above the brows. An ugly scar marred his eerily beautiful features, but Sarah found it added to his masculine warrior appeal rather than taking away from it. She thought, of all three men, Tang probably appealed to her the most visually. Suddenly she realized she was staring and blushed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare. It's just that you look like you've just hopped out of some GQ magazine," she explained. Tang's mouth fell open. "You serious?" It was a statement, not a question, albeit a surprised one. His own observation of her expression had attested to the truth of her words. He looked at Seb, who only grinned. In that moment, something crashed upstairs. "Is that your mum throwing teacups again?" Sarah asked with a smirk. "Most likely," Seb shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. So she's awake," Sarah said. "So it seems," Tang grumbled. "I might as well meet her now then," Sarah said, not one to put off the inevitable. Besides, she needed an escape from such an overload of testosterone and masculine beauty. She wasn't sure how much she could take before her brain literally blew a fuse. Having spent years keeping all even slightly attractive men at a distance, this onslaught on her deprived senses felt overpowering. "You must be tired. Why don't you wait till morning?" Seb suggested. "She'll have calmed down by then, I'm sure." "Don't you think it's better to meet her at her worst? That way it can only get better." "Lead the way," Sarah said, needing the escape more than worrying about flying saucers. Tang cocked his eyebrows, but Seb didn't argue and led the way. As Sarah walked behind him, she observed how tense he was. His entire body seemed to be one big knot. She resisted the urge to touch him and work out all that kink from his shoulders and back. When they had reached Pearl's room, she knocked and entered, leaving Seb in the hallway. The old lady was propped up in bed and looked furious. She glowered at the carer, who was looking distraught. The old lady was propped up in bed and looked furious. "Oh, sorry. Who are you?" Pearl demanded regally, as if she were medieval royalty and Sarah a mere lowly maid. "Your new babysitter. I think we need to get plastic cups, as I'm also going to be responsible for household expenses. I can't have you smashing the food and china all over the place, preferably with a lid so you don't spill so much. I'm not really fond of the smell of chamomile tea, and if you want me to sit with you and read to you, it's best when I don't puke all over your bed, don't you think?" "Babysitter? I'm not a child!" Pearl screamed aghast. Sarah looked pointedly at the shards on the floor. "You could have fooled me. I was led to believe that I was to be the companion of a cultured, educated lady." "I am," Pearl threw in defiantly. "Where I come from, that's neither cultured nor educated, but a kind of behavior no bushman would stoop down to," Sarah replied sternly, and heard a low chuckle outside the door. Sarah turned to her carer. "If you don't mind, would you clean this up for me? You get paid extra for your trouble, of course. I really hate the chamomile tea." Sarah pulled a face. "I hate chamomile tea too," Pearl complained loudly. "Why on earth do you drink it then?" Sarah asked, confused at this conundrum. What do you like to drink? Lemon squash, homemade, of course, Pearl answered at once. That's very healthy. Healthy. Where's the problem? Sarah asked, astonished. They are too lazy to make it, Pearl accused with an angry glare at the carer. Well, I'm not. I can see a lemon tree outside the window in the garden. I'm sure those lemons will do. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Promise to be good until I come back. If you bring me lemon squash with mint, Pearl grumbled. I shall, Sarah promised. Pearl grunted but settled back as Sarah left the room and headed downstairs to the kitchen with set to prepare the squash for the old lady. Why on earth was she drinking chamomile tea when she obviously hated it so much that she felt she needed to hurl it across the room? That was chapter 2. And you can get the book after midnight in Germany. So for everybody who's a bit behind from the UK towards the US, guys, you can all buy it even before Valentine on your calendar. So isn't that great? Let's see who else joined. Daryl, Julie, Janice, Susan, Rose, Verdine, and Tina. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to take, oops, sorry. Nearly spilling the water here. Pearl is catching, isn't she? So I'm going to say bye for now. I'm going to take a 20 minutes break and then I'll be back. And I'm going to read from Band of Brothers to you, okay? The first book, which is Drew, that's from that series. And after that, we're going to do some card reading, all right? So I'll see you.